Hello, folks! A girl in love has been betrayed. And we watch as our hero in a not-so-shiny armor saves her. So, before we continue to the second part of the story, a quick recap. Yona, a princess, suddenly becomes an orphan as a childhood sweetheart killed her father, the king. She has been hunted, and Hak, a secret admirer of Yona, comes to the rescue. Let's watch as Iksu, who was the one that just rescued Yona and Hak, said his job is to convene what the god says to the people. But Yon believed that it was precisely because of those vague divine words that Iksu had been expelled from the capital. Yona wanted to know more about this, which made Yona realize that despite having lived in the palace, she knew nothing. Yona then noticed Hak beginning to stir. But Yon came to check and said Hak was running a fever and they didn't have proper medicine to treat it, so it would take time for him to recover. Yon said he wasn't a pharmacist, so Yona shouldn't place too much hope in him, especially since she had never thanked anyone, not even Hak, who had risked his life to protect her. This was also the reason why Yon disliked royalty and nobles. But Iksu told Yona not to worry, because the god of death hadn't arrived yet. Later, the two went out for a walk, and Yona asked why Iksu had come to live here. Iksu said he was just going with the flow of life and believed everything had its own purpose. That night, Yona went to thank Yon for saving her life and also wanted to learn more about their story. Yon said he was just someone who looked after that clumsy priest in the past. Being a priest was a position even the king couldn't surpass. They were considered messengers of the gods, with the power to intervene in the country's governance, sometimes even igniting wars, and even had the right to depose the king if they angered the gods. But because of that, priests were like thorns in the eyes of the royal family. It was Suwon's father who expelled Iksu from the palace, out of fear that Iksu would disrupt the previous king's reign. As for why Yon brought Iksu to such a remote place, it was because Iksu was too kind. Living in poor villages made Iksu constantly help others, often to the detriment of himself. That's why the two of them ended up living here. That night, Yona suddenly discovered that Hak was missing, so she ran out to look for him. She called out his name in the forest, and he finally returned. He had just gone to retrieve his sword. Yona cried because he didn't call her to go with him. Hak, having received so many injuries for her sake, said if he were to die, he wondered just how much she would cry. Yona didn't want Hak to leave her ever again, and as Hak moved in close, she bumped heads with him. Yona thought he was trying to check her temperature, so she offered her forehead and he just played along. Realizing Yona still didn't have much experience with matters of love, Hak apologized to Yona. Apologized for making her cut her hair, but she said she had never treasured it and didn't feel any regret. Even so, Hak noticed that she still hadn't thrown away that hairpin. The next day, Hak temporarily came to understand the situation and that they were staying at the priest's house. Yona later went to meet Iksu, and he asked her who she wanted to hear the guidance of the gods. Hak's grandfather had once told her to find Iksu to learn which path she should follow. But after everything that had happened, all she wanted now was to live peacefully with Hak. However, Iksu told her that she was the storm that would stir the entire country. Later, Yona and Hak arrived, and Iksu began to recite the words passed down from the gods, that when the 4 dragons gather, the true king will reappear. Hak didn't really believe in such things, but the story still had to be told. It was said that the Crimson Dragon King, a dragon god who had turned into a human, became the first king who founded this nation. But he was later betrayed by humans and overthrown. The 4 dragons then came to save the Crimson Dragon King and wished to annihilate humanity. However, the Crimson Dragon King asked them to spare the humans. So the 4 dragons created 4 warriors to protect the Crimson Dragon King. One had claws that could tear through anything. One had eyes that could see through all things. One had legs that could leap to the heavens. And one had a strong, mighty body. These 4 warriors later founded the 4 tribes and served the king until his death. After that, the 4 warriors left their tribes and disappeared without a trace. Iksu believed that Yona's life was now in danger, so she needed more guards than just Hak. Since Hak couldn't protect her all on his own, she would need more companions. These would be the 4 dragon warriors. They might be legends, but the people who inherited their bloodline are real. so Yona should go and find them. The gods had shown her the way, and now she had to walk that path on her own. Iksu also believed that the fact that Yona had survived so many disasters was the miracle of someone bearing a divine destiny. But when Hak carries all the burden, no one says anything. That night, Yona thought about it and considered throwing away the hairpin, but still couldn't bring herself to do it. Later, she met Hak again, and he wondered whether she truly wanted to follow the path Iksu had shown her. But Yona had decided to go look for the dragon warriors, and she wanted Hak to teach her how to use a weapon because she didn't want to be a burden to him anymore. He agreed, if that was what she truly wished. Iksu then came with a request for the two of them. He wanted them to take Yon along on their journey. Yon later made Yona a new outfit and even agreed to cut her hair. Yona realized Yon really was a genius, since he seemed to know everything. Yon didn't want to boast, but said he could memorize any book after reading it just once. The reason he had to study so much was to take care of Iksu. But Yon said he wouldn't do it for free, and would charge her a fee. So Yona told him to send the bill to Hak's grandfather. Yon then realized that Hak's grandfather was a legendary hero on par with Suwon's father. But Yona only knew him as an old man who doted on children. Yon said he wanted to read books from around the world. But then Yona went to see Iksu and told him she couldn't take Yon with him because Yon and Iksu were family, and she couldn't bear to separate them. However, Yon overheard and later went to confront Iksu about it. But Iksu told him that he didn't want to keep holding Yon back in this place. He wanted Yon to go and see the world. Besides, Iksu was confident he could live just fine without Yon. Yon then considered burning the medical book that Iksu had once brought back, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Hak came over to roast some fish, and Yon asked Hak why he went so far to protect Yona while neglecting himself. Hak replied that he was only protecting the one he mattered most to him. Yon later went to the waterfall to think, and remembered many years ago when he was living in a village belonging to the fire tribe, it was so poor that Yon had to steal daily just to eat. When he saw Iksu passing by, he attacked him to rob him, but unfortunately, Iksu had no possessions and even acted kindly, which led Yon to let him stay at his house that night. Later, Yon even applied medicine to the wounds he had caused Iksu. Applied medicine to Iksu's wound, the very wound he himself had caused. Which is why the next morning, Iksu gave Yon a sweet potato to eat to stave off hunger. Yon realized that Iksu had traded his own shoes for that potato and couldn't help but wonder why he was so kind. Iksu said there were all kinds of people out there and that he rarely went to the capital. Yon deeply wanted to go to the capital to start a new life and find more books to study. Despite having a difficult life, Yon could read and always wished to learn more. Iksu promised he would help Yon fulfill that wish. He then introduced himself and said his job was to help the suffering as directed by the gods. Afterward, he taught Yon how to make a pair of straw sandals, and Yon very much wanted to follow Iksu to keep learning. But Iksu eventually left, and Yon kept hoping for the day he would return. In the time that followed, Yon made a living using the straw sandals he had learned to craft, and one day he met Iksu again. Iksu said he had searched for many books for Yon, but they had all been taken by others. He was disappointed in himself and had planned to visit Yon one last time before retreating from the world and distancing himself from people. However, Yon decided to follow him and take care of him. From that day on, the two were always together. Later, Iksu came to see Yon and gave him a pair of straw sandals he made himself. Though they were still terribly ugly, Yon had also made a pair to replace the ones Iksu was wearing. Iksu was then able to stand on his own despite stumbling, which made Yon realize that Iksu might be okay and able to take care of himself. Yon then decided to go with Yona if that was what Iksu wanted. Not long after, the group set off again, and Hak was questioning all the luggage Yon was carrying. Yon showed it to Hak and said goodbye to Iksu. Yon promised to return soon, and Iksu promised to live well even if alone. Yon then went ahead to lead the way for Hak and Yona, while Hak seemed to have finally accepted that Yon would be part of the journey. Meanwhile, Suwon had just investigated some corrupt nobles and had Kai eliminate them. The weakness of Yona's father had caused many greedy people to rise, and Suwon needed to purge them all.
He later saw a book about the story of the Crimson Dragon King and recalled some old memories. However, he believed that this country didn't need a mythical king to revive it. At that time, Yona's group was still on the road, needing to cross the country to reach the border of the empire as suggested by Iksu. Since the dragon warriors often lived nomadic lives, it was difficult to pinpoint their exact locations.
However, there was a tribe said to guard the bloodline of the dragon warriors, living in seclusion on a mountain near the imperial border, so the village would be their first destination. Hawk was always anxious whenever someone passes by Yona, afraid she might be recognized, but he was overthinking it. It wasn't like just anyone could recognize her. She also wanted Hawk not to worry too much about her, especially since he hadn't fully recovered yet. She wanted to see what the world outside the palace was like. The group then stopped at a village along the way to eat and rest. Hawk went to buy some supplies and told Yoon and Yona that if anything happened, they should run and regroup near the big tree. He then left and went to a weapon shop to buy a bow. There was also a knife there that would suit Yona for self-defense, but Hawk didn't buy it because he believed he could protect her himself. Meanwhile, Yona heard that Suwon had officially ascended the throne and was glad that Hawk's grandfather and the Wind Tribe still seemed safe. The shop owner then asked if Yona wanted anything else, but she had already left. Yoon had to pay for the previous items and chased after her when he saw she looked a little shaken. The two of them then spotted some members of the Fire Tribe ahead and hid in a corner, where they happened to run into Hawk again. After hearing the situation, he decided they shouldn't stay here too long. On the way, the three of them overheard talk about changes in the country since the new king took over. First, taxes had become lighter, but the most bothersome thing was that Fire Tribe soldiers were everywhere. Yuan liked traveling through forests like this because there was no need to worry about the royal court's surveillance. Yona then asked Hawk to teach her swordsmanship again, but he refused and asked whether she was ready to strike an enemy or at least cripple them to protect herself. But Yona had no such intentions. She only wanted to learn so that she could open a path of escape for herself if needed. So Hawk gave her this bow and told her to stay behind him during battles to provide support. If they hadn't been in the middle of a journey, he would have made her shoot 200 arrows a day for training at the same time. He also wanted her to reflect on why her father had never wanted her to touch weapons. Hawk then let Yona practice by shooting at birds and rabbits, but after an entire hour of training, she hadn't hit anything, so Hawk demonstrated for her. But when she asked how he did it, he couldn't explain it clearly because geniuses can't understand how it feels to lack talent. Yona thought Hawk didn't know how to teach, but in reality, he knew that her only problem was lacking the physical strength to draw the bow. When Hawk overcame that issue, she would be able to learn archery on her own. After that, Yona diligently practiced shooting arrows to make them fly as straight as possible. Yoon noticed that Yona was willing to practice even at night, just to master it faster. And indeed, her technique had improved, though the cost was her hands becoming scraped from drawing the bow too much. Yoon also knew a bit about archery, but he didn't use it because he believed it was not worth it for someone half-hearted to wield a weapon. When someone takes up a weapon, they must be mentally prepared to take another's life. If you lack resolve or hesitate, the price will be steep. The reason Hawk was still alive was because he never showed mercy to his enemies. The next day, the group continued their journey, and suddenly, Yona stopped by the roadside. She wanted to shoot a wild boar. She had come to understand that the moment you take up a weapon, you must have the mindset of seizing something from another. She knew her father wouldn't approve of this, but now she had to do it in order to survive. She fired an arrow with the boar, but missed, so Hawk told Yuan to go on ahead. He said Yona still lacked killing intent. She could shoot objects, but not living things. He wanted her to shoot at him while imagining he was her pursuer. He was confident he could dodge his arrows, so Yona fired. But when he told her to imagine him as Suwon, she shot an arrow that grazed his face. Hawk realized that she still needed a bit more refinement, but more important, he wanted her not to worry too much about protecting him, because protecting was his job, not hers. The two of them then continued on to find Yoon. Suddenly, Yona noticed Yun's luggage had been left on the ground, and right after that, they were shouted at by unseen voices telling them to leave. But Hawk swung his weapon, sweeping away the mist and revealing the mountain villagers. They noticed Yona's red hair and asked about her identity. She said that she came under the guidance of the priest and was searching for the 4 dragon warriors. They then revealed that their village was the White Dragon Village, the place that protected the descendants of the White Dragon. At this time, Yeon was being held in a cage and hoped that Yona and Hak hadn't been captured like he had been. But soon after, the 2 of them were also brought in, although they weren't actually being captured. Once Yona spoke up, they released Yeon, and Hak explained that everyone had suddenly changed their attitude once they saw Yona's red hair. The old man apologized for being disrespectful to Yona's companions. Hak and Yoon also noticed that the people here seemed to hold her red hair in high regard. They explained that Yona's red hair resembled that of the person whom the first white dragon once served, so they believed she might be the one they were searching for. Hak asked if everyone in the village was a descendant of the white dragon, and they said no. Only one person in the village inherited the power left behind by the white dragon. That person then appeared. He had one arm much larger than normal, and the village elder had taken care of him all this time. However, he didn't know what it meant to possess this power if the master he was meant to serve hadn't appeared. There was no guarantee that the master of the white dragon would show up soon. It might even be generations later. So the village elder also advised the white dragon to find a wife soon, so he could pass down the white dragon bloodline. But for now, he had no intention of doing so. At that moment, the white dragon warrior became curious about what was happening in the village, and upon learning that there were outsiders, he showed himself, thinking they were invaders coming to cause trouble in the village. The white dragon then appeared to drive away the intruders, while Yona took the knife she had borrowed from Hak to give herself a bit of courage before using every means she had to recruit the white dragon. However, seeing her holding a weapon only made the white dragon more convinced that she was an enemy, so he approached her. But when Yona's red hair became visible, the white dragon was stunned. The blood of the white dragon reacted within him, triggering a memory of his father's words from long ago, that the white dragon must use his strength to serve the descendant of the Crimson Dragon King. The white dragon had no idea when that person would appear, but his father believed that when the time came, the white dragon would instinctively recognize them, and that would mark the beginning of his journey. The white dragon then came to his senses and decided to accept Yona as his master, prompting everyone in the village to bow to her. You noticed that it seemed like Yona's red hair had led the white dragon to regard her as the Crimson Dragon King and chosen her as his master. But Yona thought of herself not as a king, but merely a wretched person borrowing the strength of the 4 dragons. Still, regardless of who she was, the white dragon had chosen to serve her. His blood had proven that. The white dragon then informed the village elder that he would depart immediately, but the elder rushed over and insisted on holding a farewell banquet first. During the banquet, Yoon was surprised that the white dragon had agreed to join so easily. Meanwhile, Hak decided to visit the white dragon to ask for a few supplies that might help with their upcoming journey. But instead, the white dragon handed Hak a pouch of money and said that Hak's duty had ended, so he could return to his hometown. But Hak retorted that a pampered noble like the white dragon couldn't possibly protect the princess. The 2 of them then brought this antagonistic energy to their meeting with Yona. Hak claimed the white dragon was useless and that they should go and find someone else. Yoon asked what happened and learned that the white dragon had given Hak money. Hak hadn't agreed to leave outright, but he was still carrying the pouch with him. The white dragon argued that Hak wasn't one of the dragon warriors, so he was not needed. But Yona said she needed Hak and explained how important he was to her. That made the white dragon conclude that Hak must be so weak that they needed the dragon warriors to help protect the princess. But Hak countered that he wasn't so weak as to need help from a white lizard. That night, the banquet was held. The old man, who had raised 4 generations of white dragons, now had the chance to witness the white dragon setting off to fulfill his mission. The next day, the white dragon parted with Yona's group, which surprised the entire village. The elder handed him a pile of supplies for the journey. Though their tribe's mission had now been fulfilled, she was saddened that she would no longer get to wake the white dragon each morning. She knew she was getting old, but she vowed to live long enough to see him return. The group then resumed their journey, though they had no clues about the remaining 3 dragon warriors. However, the white dragon revealed that he could sense the others through a kind of connection, even if he had never met them. Yona then asked the white dragon's real name, and he was surprised that he would use the name his parents had given him again.
That name was Kaya. As the journey continued, Hak constantly provoked and mocked Kaya, so Yona had to step in and stop the two. She asked Hak not to stir up trouble and told Kaya not to pay attention to Hak's behavior. Yon then asked Kaya about the location of the nearest dragon he could sense. Kaya focused and pointed in the direction he felt. He then wanted to go ahead to lead the way, but promptly fell into a hole full of centipedes, proving once again that he was just a sheltered noble unused to the outside world. Yon told him to stay at the back of the group from now on. After being pulled out of the hole, both Kaya and Hak suddenly sensed the presence of multiple enemies around them. Yon and Yona hid nearby, and Hak suspected it might be the Fire Tribe, but it turned out they were just bandits. So neither Hak nor Kaya held back. The bandits still believed they could overwhelm them with numbers, but Kaya activated his dragon arm and charged in to attack. Hak was surprised by Kaya's strength, but he didn't want to be seen as incompetent either, so he also showed off his own power. Kaya was about to strike Hak for calling him a snake again. Though they openly disliked each other, the two had to admit that the other's combat abilities were no joke. Yona also wanted to help, so Yon guided her on the way. Hak was surprised by the fact that the two were both fighting, but they were both in the same boat. Hak was also surprised by the fact that Yona was also trying to aim and shoot, and she managed to drive off a bandit who was trying to ambush Hak. She hit her target and found Yona's instructions fairly easy to follow. But when Yon tried shooting himself, he failed, proving he was all theory and no real skill in practice. They eventually dealt with all the bandits, but Kaya's arm seemed to have used up too much energy, and Hak also lost consciousness due to his reopened injury. Kaya couldn't believe Hak had been fighting with such an injury. He then carried Hak as his dragon arms gave him strength 10 times greater than a normal person's, but only the dragon arm was strong. His left arm was still as weak as any other. Kaya also realized that Yona was quite strong herself, as she didn't show any fear in front of the bandits, and even wanted to protect Hak. She said that nothing could be scarier than that night she once experienced. Kaya realized that he truly wanted to follow this strong princess. That night, Kaya was surprised that the group only ate wild vegetables. Yona had no right to complain, since Yon's cooking was still better than Hak's. Hak had regained consciousness by then, and Yona wanted to feed him herself, but Kaya volunteered to do it instead. Yon asked Kaya about the location of the next dragon, the Blue Dragon. According to Kaya, the Blue Dragon clan had once lived within the Earth Tribe, but one day they suddenly disappeared. Even though they had vanished, Kaya could still sense the Blue Dragon's location, so he was confident that the Blue Dragon was still alive. Yon managed to roughly pinpoint the Blue Dragon's general location, so they decided to enter some nearby villages the next day to investigate. For now, Kaya was shocked that they would be sleeping in the forest. The next morning, Kaya looked lifeless from the lack of sleep, but Yon wanted everyone to pull themselves together since they might encounter the Fire Tribe, so they had to avoid drawing attention. However, one of them had bright red hair, one was a former general, and another had a dragon arm, so not drawing attention was the real challenge. Yon then came up with another plan. They arrived near the villages so that Kaya could try sensing the Blue Dragon. And if he felt nothing, they would leave immediately instead of wasting time searching. Thanks to Hak's good memory of locations, he pointed out a few areas that were military camps, so the Blue Dragon would likely not be there, helping reduce the number of places they needed to search. Even so, after an entire day of looking, they still hadn't found the Blue Dragon. Kaya kept pointing in the same direction he sensed the Blue Dragon, making the group wonder if the Blue Dragon might have crossed the border. Later, seeing Yona looking tired, Yon gave her a drink to ease her fatigue. That night, Kaya felt completely useless, thinking he hadn't been able to help the princess much at all, and had only led them on a wild goose chase, draining their strength. He wished he could help the Blue Dragon sense him and come on his own. But the sound of Yona practicing archery at night woke Kaya up. Hak stopped Kaya and explained that although the princess had them to protect her,
She still trained herself so she wouldn't be helpless if something happened. The next morning, Yona asked Kaya if he had slept well. He wasn't used to sleeping outdoors like this. Kaya gradually realized that he was starting to like Yona, and she saw him as someone irreplaceable. At that point, Yon discovered that the blue dragon was likely hiding in a blind spot on the map, a location likely chosen near the border so no one could find them. The group finally reached a hidden village near the border of the empire. Upon arrival, the villagers came out to see their faces. Kaya confirmed that the blue dragon was in this village, but the people here were not. Kaya said the people here were not the Blue Dragon clan, just a poor, unknown tribe. Yona didn't want to pressure the villagers, so she simply asked if they could stay for one night to let Hawk recover from his wounds. The elder agreed to let them stay and warned them that the place was like a maze, so they should avoid wandering around without a guide to prevent getting lost.
World in the wrong time zone, in the dark.